Welcome to Design Nations, and today I'm going to be looking at making an LED light that looks something like one of these. That's my inspiration. We have a light gathering or clear acrylic sheet here with some kind of wireframe engraving, and then a base that holds an LED strip that illuminates through the acrylic, and some kind of power source and an on-off switch. Okay, right. So where are we so far? We have got, from this diagram here, I have made this 3D model. Whoops, not that one. No, I've made this one right here. There we go. That's the model I've made. So basically this is where the LED strip's going to go. I've got these little brackets that hold the acrylic sheet in position. I've got some little bosses here that hold the, in this particular case, it's a micro USB socket so I can provide power, and I've got an on-off switch. And if I have a look at the camera again here, we can see that as our 3D print. One of the pins broke off here for the printed circuit board that was slightly oversized. So the one I've just shown you was an updated version of this, but basically it just gives a bit more rigidity for holding the USB socket here. Got plenty of glue gun in there holding that down as well. I've got the cutout just perfectly scaled here just to have a nice neat flush edge there. There's my on-off switch, and I've got a simple series circuit here. I've got the voltage from the micro USB socket plus 5 volts running through this red wire through the switch that acts as an interrupter. I've made it so that the on, I don't know if you can see it there, it does actually say on, is when you push in that direction. That then goes around to the positive supply of this LED strip, and then goes to the negative side of that LED strip, and then connects back through to the negative side of my power supply. I can attach the positive rail here. I'll put it that way around. The positive rail here is all the way along the top, and in this particular case, the negative rail is all the way along the bottom, and I can solder the positive here onto any of that top rail and the negative onto any of this bottom rail. So that's the printout. I've also got a little ledge in here as well, which is similar to the playing card box project, which is also on the channel here. And then I've created a little lid here, which I'm then going to be placing on top here. There's the cutout that the acrylic is going to fit down into, and you can hopefully see that the LED lights just are going to shine up through the acrylic sheet. Now I'm not going to push this down because it's going to be a demonstration model, I've got a let me just bring up my CAD file here. So here's my drawing that puts all this together. One of the things I've not got here is the cutout, which I then developed in my TextSoft file afterwards. So let's just bring that up now so we can see what we have got. So here's the CAD file that laser cut the lid, and here's my original file right here. So I've scaled this all to the same size as my base. I didn't show the dimensions in Fusion 360 there, but those are exactly the same dimensions. This outside line here, which is black, which is not cut on our laser cutter, is the actual size of the 3D print. That's 80. And then I've got just a 1mm contour here. So this brings this into 78mm because, of course, I have 1mm reduced on this right edge and 1mm on the left, which is 2mm overall. So 80 minus 2 is 78. That's then identified as a blue line for cutting. I've got this little indent here for where I'm going to have my micro USB socket and my switch, and then here's the cutout slot for the acrylic sheet, which is 3mm in thickness. So that's what I've laser cut. What I'm actually going to do is do another top for my sample here, for which I'm going to have a little finger cutout here. And the reason for that is because I'm wanting to make it so that once this is pushed into position, I can then put my finger in here, lift that off, and then as a demonstration, people can see what's happening inside the actual 3D prints. But obviously for my final version, I wouldn't want the finger joint in there if this was to be then put on display. Okay, fantastic. So that's where we are so far. In my diagram here, I've got this kind of orthographic projection here, top view, which, as I say, hasn't got the cutout on and hasn't got the indent here yet, dear me, for where the lid sits. But I have identified here some details. Technically, this should be like I shouldn't see the indent here because this should be like just this front edge external view. And then here I've got this cross-sectional view, which is basically showing what's happening here with these little cutouts. So it's more like a kind of an open-ended kind of wireframe view there, really, with the dimensions being mapped out there. And then down at the bottom here, I'm trying to map out what's happening with these little kind of supports that hold the the acrylic in position over the LED lights. I'm not completely convinced by these. They're not flexible at all, and I'm worried about them breaking off. So I feel as if this is something that definitely needs developing. If I was going to do this again, I would definitely do something that's kind of like more flexible here, so it kind of grabs the acrylic sheet. And I will just point out here as well that I've made it so that the gap between the two pins that hold the acrylic in place is 1.45 plus 1.45, which is, if I'm not mistaken, 2.9 millimeters, and the acrylic sheet should be about 3. So it means that it's going to be a bit of a tight fit, and it means that it should grab the acrylic there. It shouldn't be rattling around. But there are slight variations in the thickness of the acrylic, so that's not an exact science that we see there. Okay, right. So let's just see where we are going to go with this. What I want to do, as I say, is create some wireframe laser engraved images like this. So what I have done, let's just make sure I'm going to the right place here, is I've come to this website here, which I'm going to share through my lesson plans. And I'm going to download this 3D model of a sports car. Now, when I go to download here, I can actually see that there are two, well, first of all, it's free, okay. There are two versions. There's a Blender file and there's an OBJ file, an object file, which is a 3D model, which is more of a kind of, an open-ended generic file format. So that's the one I want to work with. There are all sorts of different file formats here, and you need to make sure that basically you've got an appropriate 3D file format that works with Fusion 360, which is what we're going to be using to create this kind of wireframe view. And I know that OBJs work, blend files don't, unless you have access to Blender and you can somehow then convert it into another 3D format. So I'm going to click on that. Okay, there we are. There's my file available. Let's just go to show in folder now. And here's my downloads folder. Now, this is a zip file here, and we've got WinZip on this system. I could use this system to extract it, but sometimes we have RAR files, which is another type of compression format. And I find that, on the system here, I don't have a RAR decompressor. So what I'm going to do instead here is come to this website, which again, I'll share the link with you. I'm going to drag this into this window here, and this is going to be extracting the content online. And there's my OBJ. Let's just click on that. And now, once that's finished, come back to my downloads, and I've now got that as an OBJ file. If I double click on this, hopefully it's going to open in some kind of 3D viewer. Oh, couldn't load 3D model. That's a bit of a concern. I should have tried this in advance. Okay, well, I'm going to pop that to the side. Now, let's go to Fusion. Now, in Fusion, I've already got some other models that I've downloaded from that website in exactly the same way and uploaded. I'm going to show you it in a second. But I've got a 3D skull here. I've got a DeLorean from Back to the Future. What I want to highlight here is the fact that this has got this Back to the Future text here on the front, which kind of messes up the wireframe visuals I find there. So I'm not so keen on that one. And I've got this Bugatti image, which is super cool. The problem is that this image is actually embedded in this kind of much bigger mesh. And we could do something about trying to clean this up and get rid of everything and just keep the Bugatti, but that's going to be a real kind of mess to do. So I'm not going to work with images that look like this. I'm going to avoid those. I think the skull is great. And the DeLorean, well, let's just first of all bring in this new graphic, and then we'll have a bit more of a chat about how we're going to represent these more clearly. So I'm going to go here to upload in my data panel on the side here, make sure your data panel is available. I'm going to go to upload. I've got this in a new project here called Wireframe Images. I'm going to drag in from my downloads folder, in this case, that image, and let's see if it likes it. Okay, I'm going to save it to Wireframe Images. And you can see now it's thinking to itself. Now I'm just having a quick look here. This is, yeah, it's quite small, isn't it? It's quite a small image. But it looks like it might be, oh no, looks promising. Let's have a see. Is this going to be happy? I think I'll just pause the video here for a second. Okay, so this has been going for about 2 minutes now, and it's still thinking to itself. This might be an upload speed issue, but I have to say, I didn't think it would take this long. The fact that it wasn't able to open it in that 3D viewer application, which is part of Windows here, is a bit of a concern. So there may be a problem with this. So if this is the case, what you're going to have to do is try and find another image. Okay. Be careful about which online sites you go to for downloading 3D images because many of them you have to pay. On many of them you have to sort of subscribe, make an account with them. That's completely your choice. The one that I work with here, you don't need to have an account. Okay, so what I'm going to do while that's thinking to itself, I'm just going to see what happens there. Can I come back to some of these other files here? No, I can't for the time being. Well, I tell you what, I'm going to close that because if I close that, it is going to keep on processing. That's not a problem. So I can see here that I've got this view. If I come to my display settings at the bottom here, okay, display settings, visual style. This is currently shaded with visible edges only. I've got a whole range of different options here, and I'm going to come down here and have a look at, for example, wireframe with visible edges only. And now we can start to see, that kind of Back to the Future logo there. That's one way which I could create this. Let's see what else have we got. Visual style, wireframe with hidden edges. That shows everything, and I find that's really you know confusing. And if I just go to wireframe on its own, that's very similar as well. So I find here the best one to go with visual style is wireframe with visual edges only. Let's go back to my skull here, and the same way, let's just kind of spin this one around here. Let's try and get that level off again with the home button there, and then kind of pull this around. Okay, something like that. Nice. Okay, visual style, wireframe with visible edges only. That's for me what I'm wanting to capture. And I'm going to zoom in a bit on that as well so I can see that more clearly. That's the one I think I'm going to work with. Let's see what's happening here with this Mustang. Now I can see there's something similar to what happened to the Bugatti. If I just double click on that now and open this up, again, it's having a bit of a think to itself here. And we can see here that, yes, I have to zoom right into this. And what's happening here? Do I have to spin it around? Yes, I do have to spin it around. And there's the vehicle. Let's just zoom in on this now, which is great, but it's going to be a real mess for me to manage that. So I'm just not going to bother with that one. I think I'm going to close that one down there. I'm going to close down the Bugatti as well. And I think the DeLorean too. I'm going to work with this skull. Okay, so I'm going to stop this video here. In the next video, I'm going to look at how I'm going to take that image out of Fusion 360 as this wireframe view, and then basically laser cut it as an engraved image so that it becomes part of my LED light. See you then.